Oh, yeah. Well, coming to you live from WRUE in Tennessee, it's the Scribbling Woman.
Hi, I'm Nancy Rue. I am the Scribbling Woman, and so are you. And that's why we're having this conversation. Here, we talk about the writerly life that's unique to you, no matter what your season, your age, or where you are in your creative journey. You are now an official dadgum scribbly, so let's chat. I spend swaths of my time talking to writers. You're my kind of favorite brand of person. And usually those conversations are creative and imaginative and inspiring, delightful and wise and loving. And at the same time, these kinds of questions sort of end up being said, being asked, or, like, I'll never finish this. I don't think it'll ever get published anyway. Do I even have anything to say? If I do, I'm pretty sure nobody's going to care. Come to think of it, my writing's lame. It's lame, isn't it? Yeah, it's totally lame. Now, we can call that just good old-fashioned self-doubt, and it niggles at all of us from time to time, like that one mosquito that whines in your ear when you're trying to sleep at night. But when those kinds of questions become a swarm that sucks the creative life out of you, then we're talking about losing trust in ourselves, believing we can't be trusted, and letting ourselves totally down. Now, it makes sense to talk about trusting ourselves in this 28th episode of The Scribbling Woman, because it's also the last episode in our series on respecting ourselves as writers. Let's kind of do a review. So in episode 23, we talked about validating our role as writers. We're real writers, darn it, and we own it. In episode 24, we discussed friending our writing rather than seeing it as this unknown entity that has to be conquered and subdued. Episode 25 focused on going indie, and we had our guest Cherie Lasota. We explored all that means, and we pretty much dispensed with the idea that self-publishing means you're not good enough as a writer. We'll have none of that here. Episode 26 took us into the realm of writing what we know and learning what we want to know so we can write about it. We came out of that one feeling pretty smart, as well we should. And finally, at episode 27, we looked at the writerly life vocabulary, that lexicon that's accurate and authentic and appropriately respectful of us. That all makes us solid. We have everything we need to move ahead with quiet confidence. Now, we got to trust it. Now, let's get clear on the fact that we do have the ability to trust ourselves, period. And you can look at your past experience and see if any of these apply to you. You had to trust yourself to have a baby, to commit to raising a family, to believe you could be a good partner. You trusted yourself to sign those endless documents to buy a house. That took trust in yourself that you could make the payments. You applied for college or some kind of training course, trusting that you had what it took to finish. You accepted a job, firmly believing that you could do the work or you could at least learn. You've made friends, having faith in the fact that you can be a bright spot in somebody's life. In fact, every time you get behind the wheel of a car, you are trusting your ability not to mow somebody down on the highway. Now, do we sometimes have doubts? Well, yeah. If we have a grasp of the importance of anything that we're doing, then absolutely we'll have some doubts. That's healthy. That makes us do things better. But when we allow our doubts to throw us into a spin that we can't get out of, then it's a whole swarm of mosquitoes. And that's when we stop trusting ourselves. But we do have it in us to finish that novel. A dear writer friend of mine, author Brenda Ullman, just completed a novel that has been 20 years in the making. It took 10 years for More Than a Footnote to come to fruition. We do have in it to find a way to get our work into the hands of readers, whatever works for us. We are innately capable of saying meaningful things to people. And it's in our DNA to say it with depth and beauty in a way that's decidedly not lame. So how do we learn to believe that? How do we learn to trust ourselves as writers? Well, I'm going to suggest 5 things to focus on that make this happen. Some of them may not resonate with you, but give them all a listen anyway, because you never know what you might discover. All right. Number 1, refuse to compare yourself to other writers, especially those who have made it. You know the comparison game, right? Okay, so you're tooling along, shaping that script, you're seeing your characters come to life, you're finding the perfect, precise word, and that last paragraph that you just wrote, it's totally brilliant. It's killer. So you take a break and you're going to check in on Facebook just to relax. And there she is, that chick who was in your creative writing class back at somewhere university. The one whose writing was okay, but the professor talked about her like she was the next Elizabeth Gilbert or somebody. Enough with the flirting. Oh my gosh, with the flirting with the professor. But here she is announcing the publication of her novel with freaking Random House. You go back and you read that last paragraph, and suddenly it sounds to you like a 6th grader wrote it, and not a very smart 6th grader. Or, okay, let's say you finished your first draft and you're treating yourself to a trip to the bookstore if you can find one. Within 10 minutes, you're convinced you will never be as good as Sarah Moss, whose books are on display the minute you walk in the door. You'll never be as good as Kristen Hanna, whose whole body of work is on an end cap, or even Agatha Christie, for whom there is being a revival staged under this huge banner. You know what? You feel like even dead writers have a better chance than you do. And you go home and you trash your draft and you say, what's the point? The point is that you've already made it just by showing up to the page, just completing that first draft while raising children, raising a husband, because they do need to be raised, and raising a German Shepherd all at the same time. The point is, it's your journey. It's your dream. It's your thing to do. You're the only one who can do it, and you can trust that. Now, if you have to, in order to walk away from the comparison game, try for a while staying away from bookstores and signings and lectures by somebody whose name we all know, at least until you can celebrate other people's successes without giving up on your own. We don't need exposure therapy. What we need to trust ourselves as writers is what we do when we know we could eat that whole bag of sour cream and onion potato chips. We don't trust ourselves not to. What do? We just don't have it in the house. Or how about if we don't read stuff in our own genre while we're planning and revising and plotting and shaping? So if it's fantasy we're pursuing, this is not the time to revisit Tolkien. Maybe stick with a biography of Disney for inspiration. If you're deep into your murder mystery, avoid Arthur Conan Doyle and just check out a nice, soft, fluffy romance to fall asleep. Because after all, you're not going to be able to compare apples and oranges. Basically, let's just cut ourselves some slack until we build up that trust in ourselves. It's not being a weenie, it's being smart. Number 2, let's accept uncertainty as part of being an artist of any kind. We've said this about a bajillion times. There are no guarantees that we'll get an agent, sign a contract, sell 1 million copies, appear on Good Morning America, have people lined up to have our books signed, no matter how hard we work at it. That's even true for those of us who had all that, except I was never on Good Morning America, and then it went away. Publishing is an unpredictable dragon. Why would we risk losing trust in our creativity by expecting it to always play nice? In fact, we can befriend uncertainty the same way we befriended our writing. Feeling that we don't know exactly where this is going to go makes the creative journey kind of more exciting and more open to possibilities. You write, anticipating what's going to be around that next corner. That's writing, not publishing. We can trust ourselves to explore. Okay, number 3. Define who they are and then proceed to ignore them. We had this conversation with some under 50s scribblies, and they came up with an assortment of theys who are saying or implying or downright bullying us with statements that make us feel completely inept. That would be experts at writers' conferences. Now, if you listen to enough of them, they start contradicting each other. How are you going to trust that all of them are right? That's another they. Nah, don't put your trust there. Or fellow writers who have been to said writers' conferences and may or may not be reporting accurately. We can't totally trust reviewers. They're just stating opinions, and opinions are like noses. Everybody has one, and everyone is different. We can't really trust marketing people. They just want to sell books. We can't trust them to tell us if our writing's any good. Again, we don't trust writers who have made it because they made it their way. This is a hard one, but we can't trust people in our lives who say things just to keep us from being disappointed. But they aren't necessarily pursuing their own creativity. So even a church community can be a they. Now, often church communities, your fellow, people of like minds can be incredibly encouraging. But when they start saying things like, have you examined whether your writing is going to give God glory? You might want to step away from that conversation for a while. We are not they. We are us. Now, we can seek wisdom from a few people that we do trust, and then we move forward as we. So maybe stay away from writers' blogs, except for mine, of course, until we get centered. Again, even mine. Let's find a mentor that we believe in and listen to only that person until we can become our own mentor. Set aside the books we think are brilliant and write our own. There are no rules anyway. There's only basic wisdom from which we develop our we-ness, not theyness. All right, number 4. Get you some chutzpah, girl. You know that Yiddish term that means extreme self-confidence and audacity. Or to be a little graphic, it means we can strap a pair on, ladies. We might have to act as if at first, as if we know exactly what we're doing, as if we're going to do this thing no matter where it takes us, as if we are going to touch lives. That's not pretending. That's not being inauthentic. Don't you put on your confidence when you go for a job interview? When you tell your kids high school is going to be fine, even though you're terrified for them? Or when you walk into a bank to ask for a loan, don't you put on that mask of of course you're going to give me the loan, while wishing that you had used a stronger antiperspirant? Besides, you do know what you're doing because you know how to do you and nobody else does. You can go into the unknown because it's your unknown. You will touch lives because you're called to it. We're imaginative people, right? So we can imagine what it will be like to finish that novel, complete that short story, compile those poems, put together a proposal for a nonfiction book. Once we envision it, if we act as if we're doing it, then we will. Finally, and this is number 5, we need to remember that we didn't decide to be writers any more than we decided to have blue eyes or be 5'7" or be able to touch our nose with our tongue, which I used to be able to do and I will not demonstrate for you now. We can trust the gift. It's not one of those jokes that when we open the lid, it's going to pop out like a collapsible snake and go, ha, just kidding, fooled you. In episode 19, we talked about the spirit that's behind our creative pursuits. This writing thing is not on us entirely. We aren't alone in it. And when you think about it, it's an insult to our spiritual natures to walk away from this gift and not to trust in it. So how about some prayer for self-trust? How about some meditation on what this gift really means? Some communing with nature, where everything out there is doing what is theirs to do. Now, before we go off and ponder what this means to each of us, where we are, might I point out some things that we can never trust, things that are not any of us. And as we've mentioned before, we can't trust particular results. It's not like taking the bar exams and then immediately becoming a lawyer. If we aren't immediately published or get 5-star reviews, that isn't failure. Not our failure, anyway. We can't trust promises from marketing experts who make their living selling us their expertise. Yeah, we need to understand the basics, yes. Then we have to trust ourselves to know what's going to work for our personalities and what isn't. Can't trust the expectation that we will write our best every time we sit down at the keyboard. Nobody does. To consider ourselves less than because we have rough writing sessions in which everything we type is pure caca is to break trust with ourselves. So, Scribblies, if we set authentic intentions for ourselves, what's not to trust? If we heed what's authentic to us and let the rest pass, that's trust in our ability to discern. And if we recognize that we're not alone in this, we're trusting something far greater than ourselves, something that says, this is what you're made for. And for what it's worth, I'm trusting you to do that. I hope that you really take something from this episode and go away and ponder it and find yourself growing stronger and having more faith in yourself. We try to do that in every episode of The Scribbling Woman. So if you'd like to subscribe, we have a new thing. If you just do subscribe, you will receive a free PDF download so that you can delve more into this idea of the trust trail. You can also read more about us on the blog at www.nancyrue.com. And then, of course, until next time, Scribblies, you scribble on.